We got our main man from ABC 10, Matt George, joining us here on the show. And I just laughing because Matt George, throughout the whole break, just heard me go on this rant about Sam Darnold, Trey Lance, waited patiently, didn't say a word. And then he was about to open his mouth and say something. I said, hold on, Matt, we're coming right back. You can't talk.
You've been spending too much time with Davion Barling. You got this lead chair down. That's the D-Lo special right there. What up, guys?
Make it happen. What's going on, Matt? How you doing?
It's good. It's good. I'm ready to talk quarterbacks. Apparently, coming in here. I mean, I'm with you. The question you asked on the during the break, it's definitely Trey Lance over Sam Darnold if I feel good about it. But
so let me ask it to the people out there on the radio side who weren't able to see it on the stream, and I'll ask you. You didn't get a chance to weigh in it on yourself. I asked the question: if you had to pick, I don't think anybody feels confident in either one of these two guys. I'll say that. I understand that. But that's not the exercise. The exercise is asking a question and making a decision. If you had to pick, who would you have more faith, more belief that they could get you to a Super Bowl? Trey Lance or Sam Darnold? Who would you pick?
Well, if either of them are getting me to the Super Bowl, it's because I'm thanking the defense for being maybe one of the best defenses ever in NFL history for one.
But I'll stop you there. We don't know that. We don't know that.
If it
could be the truth. We don't know. We don't know.
I think the most reliable thing on the San Francisco 49ers period is that defense. And no matter what happens, that defense is there for you. So whatever quarterback is getting you there, it's in large part because of that defense. But to your point, Kenny, I'll say this: to make it to a Super Bowl, and then on top of that, to win a Super Bowl, I feel you need a quarterback that can make you plays and make special plays. And when you're asking about who's more capable of doing that between Lance and Darnold, I think it's Lance, just because of his athletic ability and his ability to escape outside the pocket and do things outside of the pocket. Still has a lot to show. I get the argument for Darnold is more experienced, but if Darnold leads the pocket, I'm hoping he throws the ball away or just goes to the ground without getting touched. Like that's to that point with me. So I have more faith in Trey Lance in that case. It's also because there's still the unknown that is exciting about Trey Lance. But again, no matter, even Brock Purdy, like if they're making it and winning a Super Bowl, it's because of that defense.
I'm going to take the other side. I'm going with Darnold. He just has more experience. He can game manage where we don't know what Trey Lance can do at all. And you're not a team that can sit there and wait. You know, I liken this a little bit to like Trey Lance is the Jimmer Fredette versus Isaiah Thomas thing. Like, he lost out to the last pick in the draft. He was the third pick in the draft, and like he's on the outs. Like he hasn't shown that he can do anything at the NFL level. He's gotten hurt a couple of times. On occasion, he looked like spectacular. He made some great throws, but he also made a lot of bad decisions, a lot of bad throws, and it's really hard to gain like some momentum as a quarterback if you can't stay healthy. And unfortunately for him, like his opportunities there, you know, again, we can talk about Marvin Bagley. It's like, it's really hard to keep building on things when you're not on the field, and it's something he's going to have to deal with.
So I'll say this. So just going on the other side here, playing a little devil's advocate. I never want to play devil's advocate. I don't want nothing to do with the devil, to be honest with you.
Okay.
I don't know why these sayings that come up. I don't know why they always come up this way. I don't want anything to do with the devil. But
or dog fights.
Dog fights. I don't understand this stuff. Sam Darnold could have all the experience he wants. What he has shown you is he can't win, and he can't play good enough to have a team be successful. That's what he's shown you. Brian Hoyer has all the experience in the world. Blaine Gabbert has started games in this world, started way more games than Trey Lance. I don't think anybody would say, hey, let's put this guy on the team and let him be the backup quarterback. Maybe they would do it ahead of Trey Lance, but I'm just saying they wouldn't be confident. They wouldn't say, oh, we're confident because he's played games. Sam Darnold, Blaine Gabbert, Brian Hoyer, they've shown you they're not good enough. That's what they've shown you. You can start 1,000 games. If you show that you're not good enough, that shouldn't be anything that gives anybody any confidence.
No, I get it, but I think the difference is that Darnold started a ton of games. Like, and some of the guys you mentioned, their career backups, where Sam Darnold was a starter for a long time. And like, I'm not saying he's the answer. I'm just saying that if I have to choose the lesser of two evils, I'm probably taking the one that has experience over the guy who we don't know what he is, and you're too good of a team to venture into the space of let's let him go out there and see how it goes. Like, no,
The other
you have
reason,
Super Bowl aspirations. Kenny's already locked you up for at least one Super Bowl this year.
well, I mean, they are a Super Bowl contender. There's no doubt about that. They are a Super Bowl contender. Matt, George, before you get to respond to that, I would just say this. This was the reason why I said there's almost no reason that I would have Trey Lance behind Sam Darnold. No reason whatsoever. And I'll give you my explanation. And James, it's almost like what we talked about with Namias Keita. You can always go to Sam Darnold. You can always go to him. If Trey Lance, you put him in there for 2 games and he just looks lost, you can always go to Sam Darnold. Find out what you have with Trey Lance. Find out if he can run your offense. Find out if, he's better than people are giving him credit for, or it's really just a situation where he hasn't had the opportunity and because of health. And once he gets the opportunity, he shows you he can really play on this level. You can always, who Sam Darnold is. You can always go to him. Give it a 2-game sample size. Be like, Trey, you got 2.5 games to show us what you got. And if it doesn't look good, we'll go to Sam Darnold. You can always go to Sam Darnold. So there's no reason to bury Trey Lance and put him 3rd string and maybe ruin his confidence or ruin anything that's going on because of Sam Darnold. You can always go to him, and Sam Darnold going to be Sam Darnold, whether he's the 2nd, 3rd, or off the street quarterback. He's going to be the same player. So I don't see any benefit in putting Sam Darnold ahead of Trey Lance on the depth chart.
I think there's the 2 questions you're asking are 2 extremely different questions. The first one was the hypothetical of who do you trust to win you a Super Bowl more. The second one is who is the better backup quarterback for this version of the San Francisco 49ers. And I think when you're looking at a backup quarterback to back up Brock Purdy, you're hoping that they never see the field. But if they do, you're hoping they can continue what Purdy in your offense was doing. If that's the case, I understand an argument completely for Sam Darnold. I think Sam and Brock are maybe a little more. Brock is way better, but I think Sam and Brock are a little more comparable than Brock and Trey are. But at the same time, like I'm with you. I think you still owe it to Trey. I think you still owe it to yourselves with the amount of investment you put into Trey. I think you still owe it to see what he can be. And I still think there's still a chance Trey could be the guy. Like we saw Brock play really, really well for 7 games or whatever it was. And we're excited about that too. But if Trey got a 7-game sample size, what would he look like? So it's the book's not closed, or the story's not closed on Trey either. Personally, I hope neither of them see the field at any point this season. And I hope Kyle brings all 3 of them into the season just so he can feel a little bit better about how last season ended. But early on, I'm picking Trey over Sam. But if it ended up being like in the playoffs and God forbid Brock goes down again by getting his arm hit in the playoffs and they need someone to kind of play the exact same way, it might be Sam that gets the call.
You heard it here first. ABC's Matt George says he doesn't think either one of them should see the field, and Brandon Allen should be the set backup quarterback. You heard it here first.
Wait, what do you mean backup starter?
Well, and I think the other thing, like we talked about Keita yesterday, like I would give Keita an opportunity early in the season if you're going to keep him on the roster and see what we need. But there's a big difference between 82 games and 17 games. And every game in the NFL matters so much. It might not matter for your division this year. You might be able to sit back and try some things. That might be a possibility, but you still want home field advantage in the playoffs. You still want a first round bye. These are things that if you're the 49ers, you have to be looking at right now. You can't look at long term. And so like, and then I'll add the other element. Do you want to open the door of Trey Lance versus Brock Purdy? Like if you have Brock Purdy go down and then you have Trey Lance come in and all of a sudden Trey Lance is really good for 2 or 3 games and Brock Purdy comes back. With Sam Darnold's a backup. There's no question. He's a backup. He's like, while I've been saying he's got the experience, he's got 55 starts, he also is no longer that guy. And he is now a backup quarterback in the NFL, and he'll play out that role for the next 10 years. He'll probably make so much money that, we'll be like, what in the world? How does he keep making all this money just to
that Carson Wentz money?
Yeah, he's going to roam the earth. Who was Patrick Mahomes' backup for the last
Chad Henne.
Chad Henne. And Chad Henne,
Michigan,
like
Michigan great.
Yeah, that guy hasn't done anything in the NFL in like 18 years, but he keeps making a paycheck. And you're like, that guy's still in the league.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where Sam Darnold is. And so my point would be that if you put Trey Lance in there, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, what do we got here? Now you put that seed of doubt of what's going to happen. And like, maybe that's a good thing going into next season where you could have a quarterback controversy and we could let these guys battle it out. But for right now, like I'll flip you want to talk about the confidence of Trey Lyles and all that stuff. I want Brock Purdy to have all that confidence too. Mm-hmm. And I want him to be the guy that feels like this is his team and push forward with that and don't put some weird seed of doubt in his mind.
Well, I understand that. I
complex, isn't it? This is weird.
I would flip that because everybody, and this is something that's frustrating to me. I'll go on a rant about this at some point. It's not going to be called KC's rant. That's not. We ain't doing that here. But
it's not a Ken Piffany.
No, it's not a Ken Piffany either. But the whole objective of or the thought process of let's trade Trey Lance so we can get something for him or whatever. That's an NFL thing. They're always looking to trade or cut somebody. Like they're already talking about when they can cut Deebo Samuel. You just signed him last year. It's just, it irritates the hell out of me in the NFL and the people who talk about the NFL. Always looking to trade or cut somebody. But to that point with people that's always trying to, trade the person. If Trey comes in and say Brock Purdy's out for 3 games, Trey lights it up. You go back to Brock. Yes, you may have a little bit of controversy and a little bit of pressure on Brock, but what you've done is you've upped the trade value of Trey Lance. And you can move on. If you believe Brock is that guy still, you say, no, Brock is our guy. Then you're probably, according to people, you're probably looking to trade Trey in the offseason anyway. If he comes in and plays well, now you've upped his trade value. You go from getting a 6th-round pick to now they look at him, no, this is a starting quarterback in this league. We'll give you a 2nd. We'll give you a 3rd. You might even get a bidding war for a trade with Trey Lance.
There's so many things that could happen here.
Yeah. There's a lot of things that could happen. The thing that we want to happen, I'm with Matt. I gave him a hard time, but if Kyle believes Brock Purdy is QB1, fine. I want to see Brock in there all year long, healthy, playing well. And I love Trey Lance. I would love for Trey Lance to be QB1 and to be that guy. But I just think today, going into this season, I think Brock Purdy's a better quarterback. And I think he's better. I want to see him play all the games and win. That's all that matters.
Yeah.
To James' point earlier, too, about the QB battle potentially opening up between Purdy and Lance in this scenario, the common saying, maybe a cliche, and I know I use it every once in a while, too, and I use it a lot when looking like at NBA training camp battles, is when you have so many good options, it's a good problem to have for a coach. Mm-hmm. But is it really, though? Like, is it in players dominated leagues where ego matters so much, and players, especially now in the NBA too, it's a good problem to have, except you piss one player off and now he's demanding a trade and is saying, I'm only going to this, and this team, and kind of hurts you in that way. I just wonder, I was curious, I'm taking it on a completely different direction, but your guys' opinion on the saying or the idea that having a lot of depth at one position, when it's a skill position like quarterback, you can only really play one guy. It's not like running backs where you can play multiple, or wide receivers when you can play multiple, or even like point guard in the NBA. It's really pretty much one guy and his backup for 15, 20 minutes. Is that really a good problem for a coach to have?
Yeah, I think it's interesting, Matt, because you want to have guys that have different skill sets, so you're not always the same, but you also want to have guys that have similar skill sets, so you don't have to change everything.
Right.
So like it's the conundrum with Domantas Sabonis. Like, he doesn't block shots, so we need a shot blocker. So you go out and you get Alex Len, but Alex Len isn't a passer, and Alex Len doesn't rebound like Domantas. So we might need someone who's a little more versatile. So let's go get Nerlens Noel. Okay. Well, Nerlens Noel can't really score. He gets pushed around. There's these things about Nerlens Noel that doesn't fit either. And he's a rim runner. He's not a guy you can run any offense through at all. And so then you look at Neemias Queta and you're like, okay, well, Queta he looks more similar to Domantas than the rest of them, but I might need different things on this night and different things on this game. So you can't have like 4 different looks at every position, or 5. And we didn't even talk about the fact that Trey Lyles is really the backup center. Mm-hmm. So, like it's complicated. And that's why, like, I agree with you, Matt. Like having too many options sometimes can be a problem, but you still want to be able to cover all of these bases at the same time. And it would be nice if you had, more length and athleticism at the 3 and the 4, but that guy's got to be good enough to play.
Right.
And, like, how is it if you go out and get a guy right now, is he going to steal minutes from Keegan Murray, Harrison Barnes, Sasha Vazenkov? Like, is he going to be able to steal minutes? And the answer is probably no. So, yeah, I get what you're saying, Matt. It's a complex question.
I understand as well, but I'm, maybe I'm a little old school with all this. Yeah, give me all of that. Give me all the talent. And what I feel it will do is it'll do two things. It'll weed out the people that want to compete and don't want to compete and want things handed to them. It would also weed out the people, and you'll find out who's really about winning, who's really about the team, and who's really about themselves. You look at this Kings team last year. Terrence Davis, I'm sure he believed he was a legit backup shooting guard in this league, and could play in this league. He could play Malik Monk's role. I haven't talked to him about it, but I'm confident he believed I can do that. I'm good enough to do that. But he understood with this team, he bought in, and he said winning is most important, and that's going to include me not playing some nights. And when I don't play for 3-4 games and coach says it's time for you to go in, it's not me pouting. It's not me saying it's about time, having a bad attitude. It's okay, this is my time. I'm going to come in and produce. I'm going to do what coach asked me to do, or I'm going to try my best, and when I don't play for 2-3 games, I'm not sitting on the bench pouting. I'm up cheering my teammates on. I'm up, rooting these guys on. I want to see Malik, who's getting my minutes. I want to see him succeed. I'm going to be just as hyped when he does something well. That's who you find out who's about the team. Can you do that for 5 years? Probably not. So you're going to have to cycle these guys in and out. But for a year or two, Davion Mitchell, I know Davion Mitchell wants to start and believes he's a starting point guard in this league. I think he's a starting point guard in this league. But he's a backup right now, and he's like, this is my role. I'm about winning. And I'm going to make sure that I do everything I can to help this team win. You know what I mean? And his response to, not playing in crunch time is always, I got to be better, compete. That's what I talked about before. I'm willing to compete. I don't think things should be handed to me. I'm willing to compete. That's what you find out when you have, quote, too much talent, and why it's a good thing, because you find out who the competitors are and who's about winning. Real quick, I remember Colin Kaepernick's second season, maybe his rookie year. Might have been his rookie year. But the Niners played the Bills, and they beat the hell out of the Bills. They beat them like 56-13 or something like that. Alex Smith was a starter. They beat him so bad, Cap got in like for the whole fourth quarter, scored like a passing touchdown and a rushing touchdown or whatever. He was the backup. Alex Smith was a starter. There was no controversy. He was the backup. Alex was a starter. Cap does that, looks good in the time that he plays. Nobody says, hey, there's a quarterback controversy. But I remember Cap tweeted out, and it was like the next morning, like 5 a.m. It was like a picture of him in the gym, and he tweeted out, and he was just like, it can't keep me on the bench forever. and that was his mentality. He's like, I'm competing. I know that this is my role right now, but I'm going to force their hand where they're going to have to make a decision, and they're going to have to recognize me. They're going to have to acknowledge me, so to speak.
Acknowledge me.
And put me in that spot. He wanted to compete. He didn't want nothing handed to him. He saw what it was. He was ready to compete. So long-winded way of saying that. I like it. I'm for it. Once again, I don't think you can do this with the same group for 3-4 years, because at some point that's going to run out. Like, they're going to be like, look, I'm tired of this. I should be playing or whatever, regardless if you're winning or not. But I do think for a year or two, absolutely, I'll take a position battle at every spot.
I want to go back to something you said, Kenny, earlier. You're talking about Davion Mitchell, and you said you think he's a starting point guard in this league right now. I'm curious why, because I believe he can be. I still have questions on the offensive end, and it's his offense, the question marks around that offense, that make me question if he is a starting point guard in the league. I think his defense is more than good enough for him to be the backup. And I still think there's more that he can show offensively. And I think, Ham, you discussed this, I know, a lot on Kings Beat last season, but it felt like the first 2/3 of the year, Davion was kind of trying to find his fit offensively. And then the final third of the year, and then a little bit in the playoffs, he kind of figured out that outside shot, it just looked like he became comfortable with the way Mike Brown wanted to use him on offense. But I still think the Kings need to see more for him to guarantee a heavy rotational spot. And what I mean by that is 20 plus minutes a night, especially in playoff games where he saw his role in the playoffs fade towards the end of that series. So what is it offensively, Kenny, or is it just his defense and how incredible he is defensively that makes you confident that he could be a starting point guard or is a starting point guard in the NBA right now?
Yeah, me personally, I think his defense is always number one. But I do think offensively he's improving. There are times when he can finish a game, right, with his offense. We talk about the playoffs in game 2. He finished that game with the way he was able to hit buckets and play on the defensive end. We go back, this was way early in the season, so it was a long time ago, but the Charlotte game when De'Aaron Fox got hurt, I think Davion was 5 of 6, 23 points, 5 of 6 from beyond the arc, 23 points, helped them come back and win that game on the road as well. So he can do it. Now, when I say he's a starter, today, I don't know if he's a starter for a playoff team, right? But in this league, like Washington or, Detroit, Houston, whatever, he'd be the starting point guard. He's better than Kevin Porter Jr. or Ish Smith or something like that, or even, Charlotte has LaMelo Ball, but, teams like that. Like, I think he can start in this league. He has to improve. I agree with you. He has to improve on the offensive end to be a starter for a winning team. He started last year when Fox was out, or when he got hurt towards the end of the season, and he put up decent the number. Like, I think the when he plays, he'll put up the numbers of a starting point guard. Will he do enough to be able to win you games at a high level? Now, that's something he has to work on. But I think he's a starter. What you think, Cam?
Yeah, I'm going to say this. Like, people often think that I don't like Davion Mitchell or his play, and I do. I first of all, like, defensively, he's incredible. I think he's spectacular, and I love watching him play. He's feisty. He goes out there. You can see how hard he works. He is, just like we talked about with Buddy Hield. Davion Mitchell outworks everybody. Like, that's something that he is actively working while other people are sleeping. That's who he is as a person. And I don't even care about so much the wide open three that he misses, because he's missed plenty of them, and he should be a better 3-point shooter than he is. I don't think that when they messed with the shot, I think that did him a huge disservice. I don't know what was going on there, like why all of a sudden he's shooting like Omri Caspi 3-point shots, like scraping the bottom of the scoreboard. It doesn't make any sense to me at all. And I think it was a huge mistake. He's not that short. Like, and his release was a little slow, but it wasn't that slow. But my problem with him is that I think he can be a starting point guard. He can't be a starting point guard in the Kings system unless he makes some radical changes in the way that he thinks about the game. And there's too many times where there's a hesitation to his game, and that's not this flow. This offense moves. If you got to touch it and you got to move it, it's the half second, right? You got a half second, and you don't even really have that. This thing moves so quickly that if you're getting the ball, you got to know when you're getting it, if you're shooting or not, or if you're going to make a pass.
You should know before you get the ball.
You should. Do. And I found too many times with him where there's a hesitation to his game. And again, this offense that the Kings are running right now, it's not everyone's offense. There are a lot of different types of offenses in the NBA, and he could do very well in a lot of other offenses. Just in this style of offense, it's tough. And then I'll throw in the other caveat that I always do. The Kings don't do him any service at all by putting him in the game for 2 minutes, pulling him back out of the game, and then having him start the next quarter. That is him being selfless, him accepting that that's what's happening, and him trying to do the best he can inside of that role. And so good on him for doing that. But what it does is it really hurts his ability to get in any rhythm at all. And that's why I'm not concerned about his 3-point shot or anything else. Like, I need to see him think Kings basketball and to process Kings basketball on both ends of the floor, because he's great on ball as a defender. Off ball, he's not great. And he's worked on that, but he's not great. And that's part of the problem, that not everybody has the same skill set, and you've got to mesh them and build them into one system. And that's why continuity means so much. That's why having the same coaching staff 2 years in a row means so much. And it's why keeping a team together and letting them grow together organically means so much, because you can sometimes work some of these things out. And he just has the difficult task of doing it in 16 to 18 minutes a game.
Yeah. Matt, real quick, I want to ask you. We got Matt George with us, ABC 10 Sports here with us on D-Lo and KC. James Ham with me as well. I wanted to ask you more about Davion, right? Because I've said a number of different times, and I understand everything James is saying, and he's right as far as being comfortable in playing the way the offense is meant to be played. But I've said, and I could be a one-man wolf pack, I think Davion is a perfect backup point guard. I want him in Sacramento as the backup to De'Aaron Fox for as long as they can keep him. And they've got him under club control for a while. Do you want to spend a certain type amount of money on Davion Mitchell to be your backup? That's a whole different question. But I think he's perfect. He comes in there. He defends at a high level on ball. He's still working off ball as well, but he defends at a high level, at an elite level on ball. I think he's good enough on the offensive end to come in and potentially give you 10 to 12 points a game if given the opportunity. And you can finish games with them. A lot of the times I look at all these guys. This was my biggest thing with Mason Plumlee at the trade deadline. And a lot of people were clamoring over is when I look at the game and I look at acquiring somebody and the necessity and the need to do it, not that it's not important, but I say, all right, you're going to say you have to do something to get a guy that can't finish games for you. Mason Plumlee was never going to finish a game for the Kings. And if he did, Sabonis fouled out or he's hurt and you're in a whole world of trouble. Davion Mitchell can finish a game with you with your current roster. And that's, for me, the way I evaluate things, that's important to me. That you get a guy in there that can finish a game for you. And I think he's perfect for this team. What do you think about Davion Mitchell in that respect?
Yeah, I think Davion Mitchell in Sacramento, he's a specialist, and that's not a bad thing. I think some people might view that term as a knock because it's like, oh, he's not good enough to be a starter or a all-around player, but he's a specialist, so you need him in certain situations. But to me, if Davion is going to be capable of being a consistent closer, like you're talking about, Kenny, especially a consistent closer of big games in the playoffs, he essentially has to. And this is a big ask, but if he's not going to develop a consistent 3-point shot, he has to defend on a Marcus Smart level. You put Davion Mitchell on ball against Steph Curry to try and bother Steph as much as possible. I'm not saying it's easy, period, to one, stay in front of Steph, two, to fight over every single screen and they throw four at you in a single possession, or three, just keep the greatest shooter of all time from getting his on the perimeter. But the Kings threw Davion Mitchell at Steph Curry, and at times it looked good. At times he was making Steph Curry work. Steph still carried the Warriors through that series, and by the end of the series, the Kings weren't throwing Davion Mitchell at Steph as much anymore because it wasn't working on both sides of the floor, or at least Mike Brown felt that way. So if Davion is going to be that guy, if offensively he can get you 10 to 12 points, which should be realistically all you're asking out of your backup point guard, but if he's not going to be someone who can hit 35% of threes, especially wide open threes, he needs to be someone that is out there as a closer because he is doing as much as he possibly can to truly shut somebody down. I don't think it's possible to ever completely shut down the best players in the league, but to make their life a living hell to where I know he made Steph Curry work, but Steph still got his. So in that case, he wasn't capable of being the closer. He wasn't capable of being out there. You needed Malik Monk out there because at least Monk was coming down the other end of the floor and was scoring for you and was providing that offensive push when it became a shootout towards the end, which is more to the Kings' strengths than trying to be a defensive stopper is. So I think Davion's more than capable of being the perfect backup point guard here, Kenny, to your point. I love Davion here, and I still do think there's another level to his offensive game that he's trying to figure out, and quite frankly, I think the Kings are also trying to figure out. I put a lot on Sacramento too to figure out how to make that work. But if he's going to be a closer as is, he has to be a shutdown defender. And he wasn't that against Steph, at least. So it's a big ask.
Yeah. And Matt, to that point, I'll say this too. The other problem to close out a game you got to either, if someone's hurt, that's one thing.
Mm-hmm.
But if not, you got to beat out De'Aaron Fox.
Mm-hmm.
You got to beat out Malik Monk. You got to beat out Kevin Huerter. And now you got to beat out Chris Duarte as well.
Mm-hmm.
Who Chris Duarte is an outstanding defender at 6'6",
Mm-hmm.
not 6 foot tall. And so, like, how will he pair as a defender in crunch time, a better shooter, you know, a guy who's played with Sabonis? How will he fit in crunch time alongside De'Aaron Fox? Because that's a whole nother wrinkle that you can look at.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that there's, like, I get what you're saying. I'd also make the argument with Mason Plumlee that if you had Mason Plumlee, you could have allowed Domantas Sabonis at least another 5 to 7 minutes a game to rest through a lot of the final 30 games of the season while he was healing his hand.
Mm-hmm.
You could have given him some rest. And Mason Plumlee can finish a game. You have a better player.
He can, like, in theory, but I'm just looking at the 5 guys that would finish for the Kings. Yeah. Mason Plumlee wouldn't be one of those 5 guys.
Well, yeah, but I mean, in all honesty, Davion Mitchell wasn't one of those guys either. I mean, he finished a couple of games, but at the end of the day, he wasn't good enough to beat out Malik Monk, De'Aaron Fox, Kevin Huerter in those moments to steal those minutes, or even a Terrence Davis in the playoffs. Like, they used Terrence Davis instead of him in the playoffs. So
and it didn't work.
It worked in game 6. Well, it didn't work.
It worked in game 6. Malik Monk and Trey Lyles and De'Aaron Fox carried them in that game.
Yeah.
I love TD as well, but I mean, they tried to go back to the well in game 7 and it was lights out.
Yeah, and he was outstanding. Davion was outstanding in the playoffs defensively. Like, there were times where it was like, you look at his stats, and he was really good. And for that matter, I think the other problem that Davion has moving forward with regards to that is the Kings are a really good defensive team in the final 5 minutes of game anyways. They are. They're not a good defensive team for the other 43 minutes, but they're really good in the final 5 minutes. And we saw it in the playoffs where all of a sudden they're really good for 48, or for most of 48 through almost all of the 7 games. They were really strong defensively. So, like, you got to figure out if that's your niche, and all of a sudden guys who can play defense, who haven't played defense, start playing defense, it makes it even more difficult for you to get on the court. So, and I like him.
I was just thinking about it. That was a tough matchup in the first round. That was a tough matchup. I thought the Kings were a better team, but having to deal with Steph, Clay, Andrew Wiggins coming back, I'm just thinking about offensively. Defensively, I didn't think the Warriors were that good. But offensively, having to deal with Steph and the way he runs around, that's a tough intro to the playoffs right there. I was like, man, like, if they would have played Memphis in the first round, I think they beat Memphis. Memphis is pretty predictable with what they do offensively. You know,
there are a lot of teams I think they could have beaten in the first round.
Yeah.
And to my point, I'll tell you, in the playoffs, Davion held his opponent to 29% shooting from 3, 10% below average. He held on 2-pointers, 16.4% below average. Like, these are incredible. Overall, 13.7% below average. He was incredible defensively. De'Aaron Fox's stats aren't this good, but they're really good as well in the playoffs. And that's the problem. Like, one guy gives you so much on one end, and he's starting to show you on the other end he can do something. And another guy gives it on one end and can't give it on both ends of the court. So,
2020 is hindsight, but I mean, Mike Brown, do you guys think, I shouldn't say it as an absolute, but do you think Mike Brown would like to have that game 7 back, giving TD the minutes that probably should have been Davion's? Like, he didn't probably believe Davion could do as much as TD could offensively, potentially. So that, I think that's why he went with it. But you think if you ask him right now, yeah, I'd like to have that back. I'd rather give Davion some of those minutes.
Matt?
I think if he's asking for a game back, it's game 5 where in your building Draymond dropped 21 on you. I think that's the game that he's asking for it back. But
there's nothing you can do about that. You leave him open like you're supposed to, and he actually hits shots. It's like,
right, but I'm running that game back, and I'm saying, Draymond, do that again. Like, that's the game I'm asking back, because the Kings played well enough on. I mean, game 7, it's hard to say. Like, Steph is so incredible, and covering this series, like, gave me an even extra level of appreciation towards Steph Curry, to where, like, I was on the podcast and I was saying, even from a Kings fan perspective, you just have to appreciate greatness when it's in front of you. And the story that came out that Steph gave the speech to his guys before the locker, or before the game 7, hey, trust in me and I'll carry you there. And then he goes in and provides that game 7 performance. Like, I'm not necessarily like a fate guy or anything like that. I don't know if you run that 100 times, I don't know if Steph is letting them lose more than 10 or more than 5.
Right.
Like that's just the kind of player that he is. So truthfully, I'm at peace with how that series went. I'm at peace with how it ended. I'm at peace with how Harrison missed his shot. I'm at peace with how 3 out of the 5 starters struggled at times. Like I'm at peace with it because I believe that's going to make this Kings team better. And I believe like my favorite part about the season ending was De'Aaron Fox taking the podium and saying, for the first time, this really stings. Like this really hurts. That was my favorite. That was the best thing he could have said. And now I expect those words to translate to action come next season when we're seeing like that ain't happening again. We're not letting that happen again. We're growing from that. So, but if I'm Mike Brown, I want any game back. It's game 5 in your own building. You just lost 2 in a row in Golden State, but you can retake control. And I don't think Draymond Green's doing that to you in your own building ever again. So I'll go with that.
That was
Yeah,
crazy.
and I'll say, like, do I believe, like, I think Mike probably will go back. He's gone back probably a couple of times and thought, okay, I probably should have realized that what I was trying to do wasn't working. What worked in game 6 wasn't working. In the moment, he was very clear. No, it worked in game 6. So what am I supposed to do?
Mhm.
In game 7, it didn't work in the first half. And the one thing I'll give Mike credit for the entire season, when something did not work in the first half, he bailed on it quick.
Mm.
Like, I mean, we saw the Neemias Queta situation not work for 3 minutes. He goes to someone else. We saw Rashawn Holmes not work for a couple of minutes. He goes to someone else. Chimezi Metu, you look like you're doing things that we haven't discussed as a team, and you think you can do those things. Well, you're not going to play in the second half. So there were all these moments where Mike showed that that's who he was. And in this game, very specifically, he allowed Steph to go crazy. And we just talked about Davion Mitchell's stats. Like, that's who he was guarding. I mean, he's holding his opponent to negative 13.7% overall. That's crazy that he's having that type of impact. So yes, I do believe that he probably should have looked at a different way to attack game 7. And he probably wishes he would have made a change earlier, because you had got every other player out of their rhythm. The only guy who was going to beat you that night was Steph. And you let him beat you.
To Mike Brown's defense, Terrence Davis, I remember he had a solid game, 14 points in that game. Like, he gave you what you were looking for offensively. Then you thought maybe if he gives you that, if he gives you like 9 to 14 points, we'll be able to do just enough on the defensive end to squeak out that game. And he just didn't. Like, it just happened. Like you guys, everybody said, Steph Curry, he probably wasn't going to let that ever happen. So,
but I think you got to find more than 8 minutes for Davion Mitchell, though. I think, like, and that, I don't know if that's the main thing that he regrets there. But even if Steph was having one of those nights where there's nothing you can do, like, okay, Davion Mitchell, if nothing else, is at least throwing something at him to where the numbers that James threw out, like, you can't ignore that either. So I think I would have tried to find more than 8 minutes for Davion. But another reason why I'd go back to game 5 is the game we want back to. I completely forgot about this. In addition to Draymond going off and having his big game, if I'm not mistaken, guys, that was the game where Keegan came out red hot in the first quarter, and then he didn't shoot the ball for the rest of the game, and the Kings didn't get him a look for the rest of the game.
Yeah.
Like, I'm avoiding the tape if I'm Mike Brown, because I don't want to see that catastrophic failure. I thought that was, and some of that's on Keegan for not demanding the ball too. But if you're Mike, if you're Luke Loutz, if you're anybody on that bench, and Mike takes all of his assistants' thoughts into account. He's mentioned that many times. Hey, that was a Luke decision. That was a Jordy decision.
Yeah.
Nobody said get Keegan the ball. No one said let Keegan shoot at any point in the final 3 quarters of that game. Like, game 5, I feel like, is where, because game 6 was amazing and a lot of fun, but game 5 is where I felt like that series slipped out from underneath Sacramento.
Matt George, ABC 10, go break a leg. Once again, why do we say these things? I don't know. Appreciate you coming on, man. And we'll talk to you soon, man. Thank you.
It's always a pleasure, guys. You've been killing it this week with D'Lo gone. Hope D'Lo's having a great vacation, but keep up the great work, guys.
Thank you.